Hello, thank you for joining me today. I decided to create a video to send you since you were so nice to send me some questions regarding crisis intervention. So we're gonna go over your questions and then I'll try to answer those to the best of my ability. So your first question, what characteristics differentiate a crisis from other issues and problems that people present to with counseling? So, when somebody is in a crisis, they're going to be very panicked, they're going to be very upset, they're going to be very illogical, they're not going to be really thinking. They might have physical symptoms. You might see them like sweating, they'll have palpitations, fidgety, and then very extreme emotions. They might be very angry, they might be very loud, they might even be very withdrawn on the reverse side and very quiet. So if someone's having a crisis and something, I feel like you can generally tell something's going on with the person. They may not be doing well. So when you first meet a client, if they're having some kind of crisis, I think you would be able to tell by initially analyzing the client's behavior, what they look like physically. And then that's when you start getting into the questions of asking them. So the second part of the question, could you describe some of the ways your counseling style and approach would differ when working with someone in crisis as opposed to other forms of counseling? Okay, so this is a really good question. So apart from noticing somebody, the characteristics of them being upset. Oh, back to the first part of the question, the problems. That you can tell because it's mostly going to be something, not always, but it's going to be something very drastic and dramatic, like somebody's dying, somebody had an overdose in the family, maybe a parent is getting divorced, maybe it could be something, experience is based on person and it's based on perspective. So, I might have had a death in the family and I'm having a crisis, but then I have a friend whose best friend no longer wanted to be friends with them and they're having a crisis. You can't really put that on a comparison because it's different for every person based on how they feel about a situation. But if it's something extreme that's against their equilibrium, so if it's something that's not normal for them, like a death in the family, like a breakup, something that they're used to on a daily basis having, and then it's gone or something's changed, that's a crisis. So, describe some of the ways your counseling style and approach would differ. So, first of all, you want to be very gentle when approaching somebody with a crisis. I wrote this down because this is the best way, this hybrid crisis model. So number one, engage the client. This is how I would do it if they were in a crisis. Engage a client. So that means talking to the client, seeing where they at. When I mentioned the equilibrium, seeing where they're at mentally. So equilibrium and disequilibrium is seeing where they are at on a mental stability level. And then mobility and immobility is seeing how they are with change, like being able to change things. Like some people may be stuck or they may be able to move based on it. So engage the client, see how they are. Number two, problem exploration. So this is getting to the root, finding out what's wrong with them, what's causing the crisis. Number three, providing support. And this includes developing safety. So provide support. So this is developing a safe space not only for the client but for you. If they're very upset, if they're throwing their hands around, if they're yelling, you want to stay in front of them where they can see you. You want to give them that wide berth of space, but you're still there, but you're not too close to them. You want to provide them support, that you're there. You want to talk to them, let them hear your voice. Don't be too loud. Give them a nice tone of voice. And just be there to create that safe environment for them. For examine alternatives. This is a good example if like a patient or a client is maybe like schizophrenic, for instance, and they tell you they're having a crisis because they're having an episode and they're hearing things or seeing things. And then they say, well, they stopped taking their meds. Well, why did they stop taking their meds? Maybe that it's causing other issues for them. Okay, well, that's when you examine alternatives. Well, let me take you to the doctor. Let me get you to the hospital. Let's figure out to get you some medicine to get you some help. So then that goes to step 5, plan of reestablishing control. So this is establishing control for the client. So you want them to get control again of their emotions, of their physical being. So you help them do that. And then 6, obtain commitment. You say, okay, so do you like the plan of going to the hospital to try to get your medication changed? If they say, yeah, I think that's okay. And then you follow up with them as the last step. So that's how I would handle that, what I think about crisis counseling. The second part that we're going to go over that you sent me is when we were talking about the emergency landing and the difficulties of the people that were in the flights. When I read the passage about Shandy Brewer and the passengers on the flights when their flights had stalled or crashed or landed. I guess they didn't crash. They landed harshly and it scared these people. So you want to know, even though no one was killed or seriously injured, why are all these people having issues? Because this is a response. This is a PTSD response, a post-traumatic stress disorder response. These people went through something very crisis oriented. This is something against what they're used to. They're not used to things blowing up. They're not used to loud sounds, bright lights. They're not used to being scared. This triggered a fight or flight response in them when these things happened, and it triggered that amygdala in their brain, that fear response, to be scared, to be prepared to fight, to be prepared to run. That is something that like alters brain chemistry. This changes us on the inside. These people literally went through these traumatic situations where they, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. It's scary. It's like when people go to war and veterans, they come back and they're scared of loud sounds and stuff. This is something that in their brain, when they see a quick movement or a light, their brain takes them back to that experience, and they have that moment again where for a second they need to think, is this going to endanger my life? Because it was so extreme for them. They had never had anything that like powerful to control their emotions and their mental state, to be scared. That's why this is so important. Even though nobody was killed or nobody was hurt, this is going to be with them for a long time, probably forever. And counseling is the only thing that's going to help that. They have got to go to counseling and try to get help with that. The third question, your instructor maintained that it is not necessary to have advanced degrees in training and trauma in order to be helpful or effective with your interactions with clients struggling with trauma. Talk about some skills and approaches you have learned to be part of the trauma-informed care that you've used to help with your clients who have trauma histories. Okay, so this one I'm excited about because I have my own trauma history. So first of all, with someone who has a trauma history, you need to identify their triggers. So I feel like if I have a new client, I need to identify what triggers them. If they were abused, if they don't like loud sounds, if they don't like spiders, they don't like being held down, anything that they went through, we need to identify those triggers with them. We need to then make a plan with them on how to challenge these triggers and try, not necessarily I'm not going to say get over them because I don't think that ever happens, but work on how to work through them when they're triggered. It's not about getting rid of it. It's about the reaction and how they need to work through it. I also learned about the zone. I thought this was very interesting, the resilient zone, and how something, could trigger us to amp us up, and we get anxious and scared and we're in danger, or it can shut us down and we're numb and we're disconnected. And I feel like I've seen somebody do both of those. I've seen somebody get like really upset, and then once the trigger happens again and again and again, they start going down and they just get like numb and they get disconnected from it. And that's not good. Neither is good, but that's definitely not good because I feel like they're not reacting to it anymore. It's becoming a really negative, dark emotion. I think also with crisis and trauma responses, you need to learn what their response is, whether it's fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or affiliate. That's so important. And since I've learned about these, I realize that mine is fight. I get very aggressive and very angry when I'm triggered with traumas, and I want to fight. Unfortunately, that's really bad for me. But because I grew up in a very chaotic household, I had to fight to be heard. I had to be fight to be seen. So when I'm approached with trauma, I get so angry and I lash out. If that same thing happens to me again, if I see, if I have a drunk adult around me, it makes me angry if they're not in control of themselves, because it takes me back to my childhood. So that's my response. So I think that's very important. And lastly, what's super important in trauma responses is grounding, learning, helping the person learn when they're in a crisis situation or they're being triggered, to ground themselves, to breathe, to get outside of their head, to they're in this moment. There's nothing's going to kill them, nothing's going to hurt them. They need to be in the moment, know that they're standing here, that there's trees here, there's a table here. Like, get them outside of their head to where they feel safe. Lastly, when we were talking about this man at the NC State campus, Professor Brian, who was married, had 4 children, ended up committing suicide. I know there were signs. There had to have been signs. And I wish I could have been like a person there to help this man. For somebody, a lot of people think that these people have it together. These doctors, these professors. I mean, even people without like huge master's degrees and stuff, like even people that do, obviously very middle class jobs, like people that work at McDonald's. I mean, that's a different kind of stress. But these people are put on this pedestal. Like, you're a doctor, you're a teacher, you're a professor. You have to have it together, and that's just not true. It's sad because these people that are idolized are put on this pedestal and are taught that they have to keep it together for their families. Like, they make the money, they're the breadwinners, they're the ones that are looked up to, and they have to keep it together. And then that's when they end up hurting themselves, committing suicide, developing addictions, drinking, doing drugs, because they feel like they have to escape this reality that they don't have a break. Like, they have to constantly be perfect, and that's just not true. I feel like interventions that could have saved this man's life would be as simple as checking in on this man, asking him, "How are you doing?" People that seem like they have it all together, and this has happened to me with a girl I used to work with. She had a plan to die by suicide that day. She had a plan. She came in and was bubbly and happy all day, and it was almost too forced. I could tell, and I asked her, I said, "Are you okay?" And she got really upset, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And she got mad, and so I checked on her again. I said, what is it?" And that's when she broke down and told me she had a plan to end her life that day, and she just wanted to be happy around everybody. But because I noticed she was acting a little out of character, which I'm sure most people do when they're contemplating suicide, I was able to step in and help her. And I feel like it's the same thing with this man. He needed somebody to step in, and it's no one's fault. It's not the wife's fault. It's not the children's fault. It's not the friends or the parents' fault. But if someone would have just stepped in and intervened and noticed, and just checked on him, just asked, I mean, maybe he would have been okay. But if you don't ask, we don't know. You got to ask. Always check on your family and friends. Always check on a stranger. There's nothing wrong with just asking, "How are you? Are you doing okay?" Something that simple can give you a key on how a person is doing. But it was a tragedy what happened to this man. But I think if he would have just had more people checking on him, seeing how he's doing, I think he might have not done that, went to the group therapy and talked with others who were going through similar stresses. If you have any other questions, just let me know. Thanks.